Okay. And there we go. So, it is officially summer, which means it is Summer Saturdays at Central. Summer Saturdays at Central are brought to you with the generous support of the Friends of the Dallas Public Library. Today, you are here for When Crime Becomes Entertainment, a true crime discussion. We want this to be an open, positive, and engaging program to ensure a safe space for all. Any derogatory or insensitive comments on the basis of race, gender, class, sexuality, religion, ability, citizenship status, or country of origin will be flagged, and the person making them will be removed from the events. In addition, we will be talking about crime, and that means things potentially like murder and or rape. So if that is a thing you aren't comfortable with, please be prepared that that might be a thing that comes up in today's discussion. On a lighter note, June means that it is time for our Juneteenth Jamboree. Carol Boston Weatherford will be here. We'll be celebrating Juneteenth with our Newbery Award-winning author. She will read Juneteenth Jamboree and share from her newest title, Unspeakable. We're super excited to have her. That'll be on the 19th at 11 a.m. We're super happy to have her. We also have this great programming coming up. The Juneteenth Jubilee Lecture by author Shamari Willis. Saturday at June 19th at 2. You can register, available online. You can listen to Shamari Willis, author of Black Fortunes, the story of the first 6 African Americans who escaped slavery and became millionaires. Black Fortunes provides bios of African Americans who overcame enslavement, racism, and poverty to build wealth, create philanthropies, and mobilize political activism. Also, the Dallas Library is currently open for limited service. So that means feel free to come in, request your books, check in your materials, and stuff like that. And we're so happy to have you back. It has been way too long that we have been without our patrons, our friends, and our neighbors coming in to say hello to us. Please come in, read a book, use our computers. We'd love to have you back. You can get more from your library with DPL What's Next, which includes things like personalized reading recommendations, book bundles, and a great listening experience with PLP fiction, but not just fiction. It includes nonfiction and stuff like that. We're very excited. We love the program. Our creative spaces are also open. The Heritage Lab, where you can digitize your family history, the Fiber Arts Workroom, which you can use to create sustainable wear, and the Story Center, which I'm in right now, where you can digitally record your story. They're now open, available by appointments at the Central Library. Okay. So with that, let's go ahead and get things started with our first question. To our panelists, could you please give a brief description of your background and personal history for the benefit of the audience? Also, just because I want to know, what's your favorite pizza topping?
All right, I'll start. I'm Detective Matthew Randall with the Dallas County Sheriff's Department. I've been employed with the Sheriff's Department for nearly 29 years now. I'm currently assigned to our physical evidence section, which is our crime scene section. We go out and process crime scenes. I've been working in that section for 18 years. I've had the opportunity to work many crime scene years. I've gotten a lot of extensive training in the field of processing crime scenes. And my favorite pizza topping is bacon.
It's all a choice. And what about you, Robert?
Robert Sadler. I was a member of the Dallas Police Department. And, 2 interesting parts of that career. I was with the Public Information Office for a while. I was also the first crime analyst for the department. And during that period of time, that's when I worked on the true crime that I'll be talking about today. And I spent the last 30 years as a private investigator and security consultant. Worked with all types of people and industries, etc. And been writing almost all my life, mostly poetry. And I started writing novels 20 years ago, and one true crime book that I was involved in. So it seemed like the thing to do at the time.
That is wonderful.
Oh, pizza. Sorry.
Yes,
favorite-
pizza.
My favorite pizza is cheese, pepperoni, and bacon.
Yes. Okay. As you also may have noticed, Skip is not here. We think he is indisposed, but he might show up. He could just be late. We're not sure yet.
I'm actually here. I just got
Oh,
on.
Fantastic, Skip.
Sorry,
Thank you
I'm driving to my house and I got stuck in traffic. So I'll talk over the phone for a while and then I'll move to a Zoom.
That's fantastic. We were just happy to have you here. You just missed my opening spiel about the services the library is offering and our two co-host introductions, which means it is time for your introduction. So could you please give a brief
Perfect.
description of your background and personal history for the benefit of the audience? And for my own personal edification, what is your favorite pizza topping?
What is my favorite pizza topping? That's the tough question. So I grew up in Wichita. Do you want to know how I became a crime writer or just got into the writing business?
Your general background, what got you interested in this particular genre, and then the pizza topping one.
I grew up in Wichita Falls, and I was a cellist. I mean, my whole life was thinking I was going to be this cellist at a major symphony or a soloist touring the world. Except the problem was I was chatty and nosy, and I didn't have any desire to spend 4 hours a day in a practice room locked away trying to get your intonation exactly correct, which is what you have to be a good musician. And so in college, I began to drift away from music, and this guy down the hall in the dorm was he wrote editorials for the school newspaper, the TCU Daily Skiff. So he had me start writing them or working for the school paper. And it was this perfect combination of being social and nosy and asking a lot of questions and writing. Because I'm not even, to be honest with you, I'm not even a pure, writer that can sit in this office for 6 hours a day. I'm too gabby. And so that's what sort of got me going. And I began to write for the TCU Daily Skiff. And I tell young writers all the time in college who are not in the school, not working for the school newspaper, this is where you get your feet on the ground and you learn to do sort of your basic legwork so that you can then lead to a place where you can write bigger stories, longer stories, books, and learn how to develop character and so on. You've got to do sort of the basic ABC steps. And writing a lot for me is like, it's like carpentry. I mean, I'm not an artist. I write a lot of crime stories for Texas Monthly. But what I've learned to do is create a craft. It's like I've, studied the masters in the genre. I've watched how they've done introductions. I've watched how they've shifted to the second sections of stories, which for any of those of you who try to write, no, moving from your introduction to the second section can just be a total ass whoop. And I learned how to start doing that. And then I began to just, learn where to hammer the nails, how to craft the story, how to, it's carpentry. So there you go.
Okay.
I guess sausage.
Meat lovers, all of us. It's fantastic. Okay. So for the panel, first question. What crime medium, so we're talking like fiction medium, books, television, movies, stuff like that, do you think gets specifically police procedure the most correct? Like from what you have seen, what pieces, like what has been the most accurate in terms of recreating proper police procedures from your perspective?
Is that for me or for anybody?
It's for everybody. I want to hear everyone's opinion on this.
All right, well, I'll start first because I actually have watched a lot of the current crime shows that are on, and in my opinion, the original NCIS, as far as what I do when it comes to working the crime scenes, the original NCIS is the closest that I have seen to actually what I do.
And why is that?
The equipment that they use it properly. The majority of the time, every once in a while, they don't use an item properly, and that's kind of why I watch the shows, is to see whether or not they're using the stuff properly or if their terminology is correct. A lot of times, the terminology that they use on NCIS is very, very close to what we use in the field. The only other show that I've seen that is close to it is the CSI from Las Vegas.
Cool.
I would agree that a number of the shows do things pretty close to right from my perspective. I think the biggest issue for many years was the time crunch that happens in an hour drama, where the ability to get back some type of specimen result can be done very quickly, or there's a snap cut and all of a sudden there it is, which doesn't really happen in real life. And investigations almost always take longer than an hour.
Oh yeah.
And books, same thing happens with books. You have a lot longer situation in a novel to extract information or put information down, but I've found that procedure-wise, a lot of authors get it pretty close or right, but many of them basically are focused on the department that they are most close to. So if there's an author who's out of Chicago or Los Angeles or whatever, they may be very close to what there, and that may not appear as close to somebody who's in a different part of the country.
Yeah, regionality would I think be a big factor when it comes to that.
Like Bosch is pretty right on for Los Angeles, but that's Los Angeles.
Yes, which they would do things differently there than they would in, say, like New York or in the middle of like Louisiana in a smaller town. Okay, and Skip, what do you think?
Well, I'm not as good as the other guys on specifics on crime techniques or forensics. And I tend to read and watch shows where you get to see the interrogations and how good detectives draw out a witness or a suspect. And that's what I tend to study a lot more, is how they think through a crime. I watched this, I think it was Danish produced. It was a series on HBO that didn't get much attention. It started running last spring, called The Investigation. And it was about how this group of cops figured out how to arrest a man who had butchered a woman in a submarine. And it sounds ridiculous, but it was just brilliant, the kind of silences that good cops use to wait out a character and let them say something that traps themselves, the kind of mundane techniques that the mundane days they spend just looking for a tiny piece of evidence. And that's what I find really compelling.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I think I've heard of that one as well, and I was recommended that show as well. My uncle and my grandfather were big fans. So sort of as like an inverse to this question, which medium, so which show or book or what have you gets it the most incorrect? Like you started watching this sitting down hoping to be entertained, and just beat for beat it was just so off.
I'll start again on this one.
Okay.
In my opinion, in the current shows, and when I say current, the past 15, 20 years,
Mhm.
shows that have been on, CSI Miami, in my opinion, is the furthest off of reality for what we actually do. But it is good entertainment. I
Okay.
do enjoy watching it. But their terminology, their equipment that they use, they're not using their equipment properly. Their time frames are so far exaggerated, worse than any other show. And the thing that I enjoy the most entertainment wise out of that show is they seem to have a database for everything. It's amazing. It would be nice if in the future, which I've seen technology evolve a lot in my career, and technology has helped us solve a lot of cases. But it would be nice in the future that the what they have on these shows is actually something that we have the ability to use. So when I train people in my office, when they come in as new detectives and we're working a case, I try to get them to understand that there's always the possibility that a case that you're working can turn into a cold case, in which case this case may not be solvable right now, but further on down the road, technology may evolve to the point where some item of evidence that we collected or some documentation that we did allows them to solve that case. So
Interesting. Okay. Skip, who do you think has just completely missed the mark?
I am not qualified to say that. I have no idea. Sorry about that.
As an unqualified observer, then, because I even though I've seen a show on occasion where I've been like, that doesn't seem correct. So as an unqualified observer, massive asterisk next to your opinion on this. Which do you think just seems the most outlandish?
Ugh. Sorry, I'm on the spot and I'm just not seeing things. You know, because I don't watch that much television crime drama.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I tend to watch the shows that are driven by personalities, like the Mayor show on HBO, where Kate Winslet starred as the unhappy, depressed
Mm-hmm.
detective. I know that's a cliche, who's
Yes.
battling her own personal problems, but then solves a crime.
Yeah.
Well, that is the cliche, and that theme has been used over and over and over. And I sort of get tired of the alcoholic detective and, you know, one last case before he retires and trying to, you know, trying to redeem himself after screwing up a previous case.
Mm-hmm.
That feels tired. But when it works, it still works. And everybody should watch the Kate Winslet series, Mayor, on HBO, because there you watch a detective who does really good interrogating, I mean, her detective techniques are not fake, but
Mm-hmm.
who you see, you know, sort of surpass all the challenges she faces.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm glad that we're getting like good recommendations for like shows on this. And like that was sort of a happy accident, I think, whenever we're getting into this one. It seems that Robert may have dropped. Hopefully he'll be back on here in a second. Which is a real shame because I really wanted his opinion on this, but we'll move on and hope that he finds his way back to us here in the next few. If one of my cohorts, oh wait, there he is. We just got him right in the nick of time. Where are you, Robert? Hey, welcome back, Robert.
You know,
Sorry
I got
about that.
thrown off in mid-sentence.
There you go. So what question were we at? Rights. So as an inverse to that previous question we had, what's crime drama / crime fiction that you've watched, read, or listened to got it the most incorrect that you've seen, that you've just thought it was just completely outlandish?
I guess I tend to forget those. The ones that I like the most are the ones that are most entertaining.
That's fair.
And the closer to me is one of the most entertaining.
Mhm.
And the writing is tremendous, and so is the acting. And so if there are procedural issues that I might take issue with, the acting and the writing tends to take over in my mind.
Yeah, that is a good thing. At least that whenever it's entertaining and it's wrong, you hope that it's at least like quality wrong, or quality incorrect. So moving on, if you had to name one singular factor that separates crime fiction from crime reality, or that separates your true crime stories from the general day-to-day minutia of crime solving that you've seen or done in your own research or from your previous professional lives, what do you think that one factor would be?
All right, I'll start on this one again. To me, there may be a couple of different factors, but the one that stands out to me the most is in these shows, they always have the ability to come up with fingerprints, or what we call latent prints, everywhere, and they always make a match on them. In reality, latent prints are extremely fragile, and our percentage of making a match on them is generally 1% to 2% of the time. If we get a latent print, that we're able to make a match on it. But these shows, they make it look like everywhere you touch, you're leaving latent prints, but there's so many factors that are involved that determine whether or not a latent print, or fingerprint, as the shows refer to them, is even left.
Interesting. Okay, so specifically in this case, it's the massive amount of fingerprints that are on everything. Is just that no way is it ever that easy, which would make sense, honestly.
Correct.
Okay.
In a sense, that kind of goes for the full panoply of forensics. It's a very detailed
Hmm.
job, and the more experience an individual has, and the more stuff they're able to think of to look at
Hmm.
and pursue, the better chance you have of amassing information. But that still doesn't mean that you're going to be able to link it to someone
Hmm.
or make the match like Matthew's talking about.
Okay. And for Skip, what about on the press or interrogation side? Do you think that there's key differences there from what you've seen in your own research of the cases that you've reported on, and or the books you've written, in comparison to the stuff that's meant mostly just for entertainment?
I just think it's time length, in novels and in television episodes and TV movies, you've got to condense everything.
Mhm.
So your discovery of physical evidence is fast, and it tends to never work that way. And interrogations can go on in real life forever, and sort of lead left and right. So I don't know. I do feel, here's something y'all could. This is a little off subject, but I was
Sure.
just thinking about this. One of the true crime stories I wrote was on the murder of a dentist, a young female dentist in the Uptown area named Brenda Hatcher.
Mhm.
And Kendra Hatcher, this beautiful young woman who was murdered by her romantic rival, Brenda Delgado. And y'all can YouTube this up. That there's an interrogation that was played at the trial, and of Brenda Delgado. The interrogation was done by Eric Barnes, a well-known homicide detective for the Dallas Police Department.
Mhm.
And it's brilliant to listen to. I mean, and this is what real interrogations are all about. It's not those kind of interrogations you see on Dateline. You see a guy carefully work his suspect until she realizes she's cornered, and you can sort of see the panic in her eyes. And he does it by being sympathetic with her.
Mhm.
And this is real. And I would encourage everybody to go watch it, because you can Google it up, and it'll be his testimony during that trial, which was all videotaped,
Mhm.
and it shows the interview in the trial. You know, they have the interview shown during the trial, so you get to see this police interview where you watch a detective win over a suspect until it's clear she's the killer. And it's powerful. And nothing we can write in fiction or in screenplays comes close to something like that. Sorry, I know that was a little off topic, but I started
No,
thinking
no, no.
about that while everybody else was talking.
It's fascinating, and it's a thing. And like, speaking of fascination here, this one is specifically to you, Skip, but we can also sort of open this to a degree to everyone else as well. In what began for Skip, like what began your fascination into true crime and like wanting to do these research and wanting to write these kinds of stories? And I suppose it would mean that for Matthew, what was it that sort of really wanted that sort of inspired you to become an officer and want to go into forensics specifically? And then for Robert, what made you decide to not only become a police officer yourself, but also decided to make the jump from officer to author? So Skip, why don't you start us off and tell us what really drove you to become interested in true crime?
Well, I guess it was 35 years ago. I was a young writer at Texas Monthly, and I read this story about this man in South Dallas who lived near Methodist Hospital, who was had been arrested for cutting out the eyeball, shooting prostitutes in the back of the head that worked out of those motels off of I-35,
Mhm.
and then cut their eyeballs out with such precision that when the detectives came to when the crime scene came to the scene and they opened up their eyeballs, they had no idea the eyeballs were missing. And he was finally, they arrested him due to some good physical evidence work. And I went and covered his trial, and it was all circumstantial evidence and hotly debated. And I wrote him a letter after the trial, and I said, I want to just see if you'll talk about what you think happened at your trial and why you think you're innocent of these charges. And so suddenly I was in this Silence of the Lambs relationship, and I had never been around a true psychopathic killer, and I lived this sort of plain vanilla life. I played the cello. I went to TCU. I was just your basic regular reporter. I had there's nothing interesting at all in me. And I sort of was able to step into this world. And that's what true crime writing does in a way other kinds of journalism does not, is you get to see a person step over this invisible line into this kind of madness. And I was hooked.
Yeah. I would imagine that seeing that just drastic contrast between like prescribed normalcy and what that individual does and what they were going through is just like, it's got to be just utterly fascinating and disturbing to see, and it like a car crash, and it's hard to look away from that. So yeah. What about you, Matthew? What drove you to become an officer?
I guess my desire to help people. I enjoy helping people. It's something that my family has always done, whether or whether it's donations to an organization to help somewhere else. As I've gotten older, I see now the results more of me being able to help people with what I do. I didn't really have a desire to get into doing the crime scene portion of my line of work. I really enjoyed working on the streets. I really enjoyed helping people out, face to face on the streets. And I had a sergeant come to me 18 years ago and asked me to come over there. He thought I would be a good fit in there. And I honestly had no desire whatsoever to do it. But I went ahead and did it, and I discovered that the challenges that it offers was very rewarding. There's a lot of work that I do, not just in the field where I'm actually working a crime scene, but also in the office. And it doesn't matter whether it is a theft or a burglary or whether it's a murder. And I talked about latent prints earlier. If I'm able to collect evidence from a crime scene, and we'll just say a burglary where somebody has broken into somebody's house and they've had something taken. A lot of times people have family heirlooms taken, or something that really they can't put a dollar figure on because it's more of a personal keepsake. But if I can get a latent print that identifies a suspect that will eventually lead our criminal investigation detectives to where this stolen property is, to me that's why I got into this line of work, is so that I can help people out. And it's very rewarding to me to be able to return something to somebody that they thought they were never going to get back, no matter how small it is. In the same aspect on a murder, to be able to identify a suspect in a murder, that is a very rewarding benefit to me, knowing that I have helped get justice for the family by identifying suspects in the crimes.
Yeah. Okay. And what about you, Robert? What started you on the path that you're on currently?
I was almost going to be a cellist, but I wasn't. So sort of like a Skip in a sense. I was a fine arts major in college, and it wasn't taking me where I wanted to go. I wanted to paint. And so I came back to Dallas, and I started looking for some kind of work that I could do that would be fulfilling and still allow me to do my art. And got connected with the Dallas Police Department, and back then in the 60s, and when you were a rookie, you worked the night shifts or whatever. And so I thought, well, I'll work nights, and then when everybody's at work during the day, I'll be at home painting. Well, that didn't work out too well. I got called into the Army and spent almost 3 years in the service. And when I came back from Vietnam, I rejoined the police department. I was really happy being on the street because that's what I really enjoyed, the meeting with the people and dealing with that situation. And because of the proddings of my junior high school guidance counselor, I had an extra class and they wouldn't let me go home. And so I had to choose something. And he said, typing. I went, okay, I'll go to typing. Well, typing saved my life a number of times, and I've been typing ever since, as why I'm still writing today. But during that period of time in the early 70s, the idea of having crime analysis began to be utilized, particularly on the coast. So I was called into lieutenant's office and said, hey, we've got this great idea to have a crime analyst here in Dallas. And what do you think about that? And I said, well, I think it's a great idea. And he said, well, great, you're going to be the next crime analyst. So I took on that role. And I was looking at all of the crime reports every day from our division. So the murder, rapes, robberies, thefts, burglaries, etc. And I would catalog them and track them, etc. And at some point in time, I ran across this rape case where the rapist talked about being a Dallas police officer. And that really, shook me. I'm thinking, no way. And very specific MO. And so I started watching for that. And a little bit sometime later, another one occurred. And so I started tracking that. It was about 3 years and 3 months ordeal between myself and another partner, helping other people in the department to capture this guy, who in the end had was responsible for around 80 different crimes. 42 or so of them were actual sexual assaults. So during that period of time, I was thinking, well, this is something I would like to write about, but I didn't write about it then. I started writing novels in the late 90s, and after my third, I said, okay, I think I can write this true crime story now. And so I basically a chronicle of what happened over those three years and 3 months. It wasn't, I had the luxury of having all the firsthand knowledge of everything I saw and who I worked with and the reports and all that sort of thing. Whereas somebody like Skip had to dig very hard for all the stuff that he came up with on his fantastic book about the Austin Midnight Assassin.
Mhm.
Extremely well researched, by the way. So there's a different kind of genre between the true crime of a cop who's writing it from their perspective
Mhm.
and a journalist or someone who's writing it from having to go out and develop all the information.
Mhm. That's very good, Robert. Actually, that was we'll come back, I think, actually to that specific case that you brought up, both yours and Skip's that were mentioned. I believe later on those are questions that we'll had. So put a pin in that. We'll get back to those. This one's actually specifically for Skip. What was it like to work with Richard Linklater on turning Midnight in the Garden of East Texas into the film Bernie?
So I wrote a story about this young young funeral home director who murdered the town's grand dame in this little East Texas town of Carthage that I'd never even heard of. So as soon as I saw that story, I knew it was going to be interesting. And I was on my way to Carthage and wrote this story about this kind of gothic murder mystery and why the town rallied behind Bernie. So it got published, and I get this phone call.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "This is Richard Linklater." And, he had this certain amount of fame, even though he refused to move to LA. He had built a business, he'd built his film business in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I've always wanted to write a movie I've always wanted to do a movie about just the weirdness of East Texas. So I, had tried to read a screenplay or two, and reading screenplays is hard, especially if you come from a journalism world where you're used to facts and you're used to never flushing out, those facts have to stay facts. You can't make stuff up. And so anyway, we pretty much did a screenplay, and I just sort of wrote notes and sent them to him, and he put it into the screenplay form. And what it taught me was the power of rewriting is that you could just constantly work scenes over and add to them and embellish them and, just sort of move your plot left and right. And it shows the importance of patience, because he could have hired any A-list screenwriter he wanted, but he was really patient with me and never got judgmental. And I think for all of you, who've written, your fear is the judgmental comments from your editor or so on. He was never that way. I mean, at one point I was just writing ridiculous scenes. Even I knew they were ridiculous. And he never criticized me about them. He says, well, let's think about it. And it was just his way of keeping you, making you feel self-confident, because, you know, the one thing that all of us writers, would-be writers, deal with is a fear of failure and a lack
Mhm.
of self-confidence and a sense that you write a paragraph and think this is horrible, and you rewrite it and you go it's worse. And it's just the ability to never lose your sense of mission, and I think that's what he taught me.
Mhm. That's great. It's wonderful whenever you get to meet someone that can like really like teach you something like that. It's always wonderful. Um, I did enjoy that movie, and I thought it was the story was very compelling, and we even got some comments while we bring it up that Midnight's Assassin was a great book, and it sort of leads in to our next question that's for the panel, and it's like, what about true crime do you think is so compelling? Why is it that this particular genre it has such devout followers of individuals that are just utterly fascinated and just want to sit there and gab about this specific case or that specific set of circumstances that led to the story? What do you think makes it feel so infectious? Um,
I have kind of specific ideas about that. I think it has a lot to do with the interest level of the reader.
mhm,
It seems that for some, a particular true crime book is a much of a slog for the reader. But the bigger the niche that criminal or that crime evoked within the public increases the interest. And of course, then there's those that are just, I'll use the word fanatical because that's their niche. They really want to read about true crime for whatever reason. They're beyond the group that the niche initially formed. So whatever the public interest is, the general interest, that seems to be how people focus on it to me. And people are looking for answers.
mhm,
When they see or hear about a crime, they're looking for answers. Why did this happen? Who did it? How did they do it? And the amazing thing is that I guess the most frustrating question I always get is what happened at this point or that point? And I said, well, I don't know. And people are always looking for answers that you can't
yes.
provide or you haven't found yet. And of course, that's the answers that they want because they're asking the same question that you are as the writer or researcher.
Mhm.
In novels, on the other hand, you get to make it up.
Yes.
And
Everyone's always working with perfect information, which it scratches all of the itches, and instead of with true crime, where I suppose I guess part of it is it always leaves you wanting more. Um,
trying to be
oh,
trying to be truthful to the true crime
mhm,
is to me the mark of what you're doing when you're reporting it.
mhm. Okay. What about you, Skip? Do you have a similar set of opinions, or do you differ from Robert here on why?
I think Robert's exactly right, and I just
Mhm,
think it's also that we're fascinated by people who do it and
mhm,
why they do it. And you think of a show like Dateline or 48 Hours. It's the same formula for years. For
mhm.
years, it's the same formula. And yet, if I'm walking past the TV screen in its own, I find, I start doing this because there's something about watching a person do something, as I said earlier, step across this invisible line and do this kind of act of such savagery or an act that's just so impossible to imagine. That's what is interesting is what human behavior can lead us to become.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the human behavior aspect is one of the things that I find fascinating about it. Is understanding the psychology of how these kinds of things happen. Matthew, as someone within within the thick of it currently, right? That deals with crime on a regular basis. What do you think is the thing that drives people to be interested in this kind of stuff?
Uh, I think Robert and Skip both touched on pretty much everything. I've always looked at it as pretty much everybody has an inner detective in them.
Mhm.
And they want to be able to answer those questions of why, why did this occur? It's sometimes the gory facts and the details just draw people in that they can't get away from, and they whether they don't like to hear or see about those things, it's something that they do like to. The inner detective in them wants to hear,
Mhm. and
and usually they go away from an article about true crime with more questions than they had going.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, the it's like when we write a report, we have the who, what, when, where, why, and how that we're trying to answer in our reports. And
Mhm.
just I think it's human nature to just want to know more about something that's extremely interesting, no matter how bad it is.
Mhm. We're just naturally curious creatures, and so we understanding like crime and how it happens is understanding ourselves. So uh so while we're on that topic as well, this is something that whenever we were coming up with these questions and stuff that we noticed while we were going, uh why do you think the general popularity of true crime as a genre fluctuates so dramatically as it does, where some years it's just the only thing anyone wants to talk about. It's that for those brief months there's just something that happens that everyone wants to talk, and then there are some years where it's just not a peep, where it just doesn't seem to enter that public zeitgeist. What do you think is the cause of these massive waves of popularity?
If you want me to start again,
Go
I-
for it.
it goes back to what I was saying is what what was the initial creativity within the mind of the public as to all the questions that want to be answered.
Mhm.
You know, the true crime that I wrote about, and I've been asked by others to, you know, write other true crime stories, and I'm not interested in trying to find somebody else's story. Uh, the one that I was involved in, you know, I worked on it every day for 3+ years, and so
Mhm.
I was deeply involved in it.
Mhm.
And yet, uh, the crimes that this fellow committed were heinous and horrible to the individuals. But quote unquote, it was rape. It wasn't murder, and murder sells much bigger than anything else. Even though this guy was a serial rapist and was disturbing the public for a good long while. So the more horrendous, the more fascinating the situation is. I think that that's just one of the attractions.
All right, I'll go next. I think your interest in it is drawn a lot of what's being reported in the news, whether it's local or national or international. Um, that's how the majority of the public becomes aware of what's going on, is through our news media. And we see it in my line of work. You'll know when it's a busy news day and when it's not a busy news day, because we may be out at a scene that generally we would have 4 or 5 reporters at, and there's nobody there. And the reason nobody's there is because there's more going on that needs to be reported about than what we have going on at the time. And that's generally how the public becomes aware of what we're doing, is media.
My internet died for a half a second there, so I blooped in and out. Did everyone get to answer the question? Yes. Okay, good. All right. Just making sure. Then moving on. Where was I? Okay. So I guess while we're here, let's get into some sort of individual stuff. For it. So Robert, if you wanted to get into some more specific details about the rape case that you worked, and if there was anything you think interesting about that, or something that you thought was like that you learned during that whole process about just the human condition, or procedure, or what have you.
Well, there's so many things. Like I said, it was 3.5 years of experience.
Mhm.
The general public, this was from like 1973 to 1977. The man was going out every night and going into women's residences, usually apartments, would climb typically up from the first floor to a second floor. He had his method down pat. He would look for plants in the window was one of his giveaways to it was probably a woman that lived there.
Mhm.
And this was, like I said, it was back in the 60s and 70s. And I suspect that people are more careful about locking their doors these days than they were then. And it was not unusual to find open windows or open doors on second floor apartments. And he made use of that. He never broke in to any residence that he went into. He would go in at night and he would look for a purse and go through the purse and check their ID and see if it was somebody that he was interested in. He would cut the telephone wires. Back then, we didn't have, cell phones, so your landline was your safety net. He would go and cut the telephone wires, and then he would use those to tie up his victim. And he was mild-mannered in his voice and temperament. He wasn't, he became known as the friendly rapist, which was in a sense, a very sad thing to say because no rape is friendly. But in fact, he started calling himself that. I'm just your friendly burglar. In fact, when he would get caught or whatever, he'd say, "Don't worry, I'm just a burglar. I do this for a living." And like I said earlier, at one point, he claimed to be a Dallas police officer. So I was bound and determined to find out if that was the case. I wanted him arrested. If it wasn't, I wanted the rest of the department not to be concerned about it. That little fact was kept out of the media pretty well. I even at one point in time, on the things I was doing, I suggested that we needed to check the fingerprints because we did have a number of good latent prints from this individual. And come to find out, there were almost 300 officers at the time that didn't have their fingerprints taken, which was one of the things that was very shocking to me. But somehow or other, there was that many that hadn't. And I suggested to the powers that be that would be something we should do, and it could be done pretty easily. We could, get those prints taken real fast and have everybody excluded. Well, the department really wasn't happy about the idea of that information getting out. So that didn't happen until after we caught the guy. But he had specific information, and it made a book that's about 600 pages. So I chronicled everything I could that took place over the 3 years with myself, my partner, the investigators that were working the case, the crime scene people, etc. And like Matthew talked about earlier, trying to match things up to an individual that you have nothing on. This individual had never been arrested, hadn't been in the military, and was in no database whatsoever. and confusingly to some of the investigators was the fact that when blood or semen was found at the scene, that material was taken to the county lab, and they would do at the time, all you could come up with was a blood type. And the blood types were coming back different. And so some of my cohorts were saying, well, we've got copycats out there. And I said, no. MO is this. And if he fits this, that's the same guy. It's not an MO, because not everybody knew what the man did. And not everyone, even if they knew what his MO points were, the fact that somebody could come in and imitate him was not really an easy thing to do. So come to find out, after he was arrested and his blood was taken, that's when we also found out, oh, all these cases that we've got that we say that he did and he did, they don't match up blood-wise. We'll come to find out the lab was doing some testing, and they were skipping one of the procedural steps. And that was not found out until much later. Once the head of the lab, at our urging, went in and started testing everything the right way, it all lined up that Guy William Marble Jr. was the Friendly Burglar rapist and was good for all the ones that we had identified him on. So, and some very good detective work was done. The interview with him out on the day of his arrest was rather amazing. We had canine units out doing different things. And for example, talking about investigative techniques, one of the dog men found a pool of transmission fluid that we figured, based on the different reports we had, that it was likely that the car was there. So the dog tracked the guy from here to there, did that once or twice, 2 different times. And so one of the questions that the investigator, John Landers, asked him during the final or initial interview was, when did you get your car's transmission changed? It was one of those moments like Skip was talking about, where you could see the change in the guy. He knows he's been caught, because how in the world would you know that I got a different car and the brown car had a transmission leak? So, just little things like that bond the investigator to the criminal in terms of being able to understand what's going on. So it was a very fascinating case. It was sad, because every day he was doing something, and every day he was affecting some citizen's life, and that wife, girlfriend, or sister whose family was feeling the same things that she was. It was very, very disturbing. So I was really happy when we were able to finally catch him. My partner and I developed a number of ways to track the guy. And when the department finally realized that, yes, we're right, we can do that, we put out people to be in the right place, and he was caught.
So I think we've got time for one more standard question before we, I think, start opening up things to the Q&A portion. So to start off, to finish us off, Skip, I've got people clamoring here wanting you to talk about the Austin assassin and what went on in research for that and everything else. If you wanted to go into that briefly.
Well, years ago, reading a pamphlet about Jack the Ripper that had come out in 1888, one of those quickie pamphlets that came out back in that city then. And there was this one line that said, Scotland Yard detectives speculate that the killer, there had been 2 or 3 Jack the Ripper killings at that point. Scotland Yard detectives speculate that the killer came from a small city in Texas where a series of similar murders occurred 3 years earlier. And I thought, crime is my wheelhouse. What small city in Texas? What similar crimes? And this is sort of before Google was wide open, and I
Mhm.
didn't find much in Google. And then I did see some reference to women being killed in Austin, and I was down in Austin and went to the Austin History Center and began to just go through old Austin American statesmen from 3 years earlier, 1885. And I would see these stories about these women who had been stabbed up and down their body, an axe cut through their head, ice pick slammed into their ear and pulled out. And it was a series of servant women, Black servant women, for a year, until exactly almost 1 year after the killings began. There was this, the two prominent white women in Austin society got killed the same way on Christmas Eve. And I went, how does no one know about this story? And the truth is that there are tons of historical stories that have fallen through the cracks of history that make for great tales. Unfortunately, what you have to do is you do a lot of needle in the haystack research. I mean, I would just go through old newspapers, archives at the UT library. They have like old newspapers on microfilm, and there's no Dewey Decimal System. There's no, you just sort of, go through, put those things on, put the microfiche on, and go from page to page, and hope you see something. And it was, after several years of doing this, and it was years of work, I realized I had the outline for a very good story, but I did not have the killer. And the question was, how do you write a book about a killer when you don't exactly have the killer? So it was a lot of different challenges like that, and it was exhausting. And I got a good deal. I got a good publishing deal on with my first proposal on the book, but they wanted it in a year. And when a year came, I was still researching. And so they killed the deal. And the thing you have to know about big publishers is when they kill the deal, they demand their advance money back. Well, if you've used your advance money to take a leave of absence from your real job, which I had, you have to suddenly find that money to pay it back. So I was thinking, this is a nightmare. And it finally turned, I came up with the money. I thought, I'm never going to do this again. I've destroyed my career. My wife wants to divorce me. And it turned out to be I kept working on it. And so more years passed and I kept working on it. And I don't know how long I worked on that thing, a decade before it finally got published. And it became a bestseller because it caught a part of history that was almost forgotten.
If I could just address that real, I was born in Austin, spent a number of summers there, loved the Austin Tower lights, which we called the Parisian lights back then, and was fascinated to read your book. Extremely well researched, and I'd never heard of it before myself, and I know a little bit about Texas history. So thank you for writing the book and spending the hours that you did to research it.
Well, for all of you out there looking for something to write, there are lots of these stories that have gone on that no one knows about. You just have to keep digging around until you find them.
And you can start your research at the Dallas Public Library.
Well, as a matter of fact, I scoured that Dallas, Texas floor. I was there for days.
We actually have a very extensive, the 7-4 archives have a massive, extensive amount of information from various like Texas newspapers and stuff like that, and lots of Texas history stuff. There's tons of it, and it's available to the public if you make an appointment with one of our librarians.
Absolutely.
To help you do research.
Everywhere, and there were just tremendous histories of Texas that were printed in that era, these crimes, and I began to realize there was a cover-up going on. Oof. And then the librarians had more fun helping me research than I did.
Yeah. Okay, I think that gives us just about 15 minutes to do some Q&As. So if you've got a question in your brain and you want our panelists to answer it, please type it in the chat, and me or one of the moderators will go through it and we will bring it to our panelists' attention. I saw a good one earlier. Here we go. For the panel, do you think, this is from Amy, do you think there are moral quandaries about true crime becoming a large form of entertainment, or is it as it has always been, news?
Well, news is ProPublica last week breaking the news that the billionaires in this country don't pay less taxes than I do, or
Mhm.
that's news. I mean, what we do is factual, but it's entertainment. I mean, the world is not going to change because I wrote a book about a series of murders in 1885. Or, I mean, Robert's book probably helped in how to investigate crime, rape better than anything. So that was important. And that level of kind of work is important. But a lot of true crime is just it's just a study of human behavior. Now, whether that's news or not, it's still interesting to do it, and it still helps you understand what drives people. So I don't have any moral qualms about writing a true crime story.
Okay.
If it feels cliched, if it feels like it's a true crime story that's been done a million times, I won't do it. Like the story I talked about earlier regarding Brenda Delgado, it was a millennial version of that movie Fatal Attraction starring Glenn Close, as a young woman who had been abandoned by her boyfriend after all these promises. And she decided to take revenge. Well, I want to know what happened.
Yeah. Okay. What about you, Robert? How do you feel? Do you feel that there's a at least somewhat of a moral question when it comes to this kind of stuff, or?
You can certainly look at it that way. The crime that I wrote about was morally reprehensible, and it wasn't, it was never something that I could say, "Oh, read my book. This is very interesting." No, it may be intriguing and enthralling, but entertaining reading about somebody being raped could be titillating, but not entertainment in my thought process. But it is, people read it because entertainment is enthralling, and if you get enthralled with something, that you can call it entertainment.
Okay. And what about you, Matthew? Do you feel that there's that there is something? Do you agree or disagree with Robert and Skip?
Actually, I agree with both Robert and Skip.
Okay.
News is factual. They're reporting on the facts that they're given at hand, and it is entertainment also. So I don't know if I could answer this question any better than the way Robert answered this question.
Okay. I've got another one here from Rebecca Baker. If you could snap your fingers and solve any unsolved Texas cold case, which one would you choose that you know of? Just like if there's a cold case that you've always been like, I wish I knew what happened, which one would it be?
Well, the Kennedy assassination.
Oh, I suppose that's kind of, yeah, that's pretty, yeah. Okay, excluding the Kennedy assassination, that one's a gopher. It's like, obviously, we all want to, just to make sure. So excluding the Kennedy assassination, then, is there a cold case that you are just like, oh man, I wish I knew?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Not in Texas anyway.
I have one that is kind of a recent one, and it's local to the DFW area, and that would be the Missy Beavers case in Midlothian.
Boy, is that right?
Could you go into detail about that?
Well, I don't know if I can go into detail about it, other than the fact that what's been reported, and the lady Missy Beavers was a instructor for a workout group, and she showed up to a church local in Midlothian to conduct a workout early in the morning, and she was killed inside of the church. And I believe it was 4 or 5 ago. Not 100% sure on how long ago it was, but they have yet to be able to identify a suspect in that case.
And they have video of the suspect walking with what looks like a padded cop uniform on and a cop helmet,
Mm-hmm.
and walking with a limp that could be a fake limp or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's got all the elements, and the case cannot get broken. You know, another one that I've thought about since I was in my 20s is Walker Rayleigh, the Methodist minister downtown,
Mm.
who was accused of murder, acquitted of murdering his wife, Peggy.
Mm-hmm.
That one still haunts me.
Okay. I think next we actually had a question from Brandy. So if Brandy, if you wanted to unmute yourself for a second to ask your question, then that is okay with us.
All right, thank you. Thank you guys for being here. So real quick, Matthew, love the fact you do organizations and you're passionate about that. I do a podcast and we always highlight organizations at the end because I think when we talk true crime, it's always good to give back. So thank you for that. Robert, I love Bosch. I just got back from CrimeCon and I was able to watch the first episode of the last series coming out before anyone else. So it's a good one. And Skip, you are my editorial idol. I do a podcast called Texas Wine and True Crime, and you write facts, and that's what I like. So thank you guys. And my one question was, which cold case would you like to see solved? But that was just asked. So my other one is, what is the biggest hump you have seen in your careers? If there was one thing you had to overcome, whether it be personal, whether it be professional, what is that one thing that you almost decided to quit what you do?
I thought you said hunk. Like, what is the biggest hunk?
Oh, there was this guy. His name was Sam. He had the most beautiful eyes.
And Skip, what is your favorite piece you've written?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I love them all. I'm so egotistical and narcissistic.
Love it.
I think all of them should be on the cover and promoted on national television, but I don't have one. The biggest hump for me is always sort of getting the investigators to talk.
Okay.
They don't have any motive to talk to you until the case is over. And you sort of always want to write the story before the case goes to trial and is finished.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of push and pull, and the reporter almost always loses. Just
Okay.
part of the battle.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Robert, what about you?
I guess once I left law enforcement and went into the private sector, writing has been something that has been my go-to escape, so to speak. And so writing novels gives me the freedom to delve through these characters that do these strange things. And I use a writing process called writing in the dark. I don't plot, don't have a plot, don't know what's going to happen. The characters have their own set of characteristics and imbued with their own ideas, and they tell me what the story is. I just run along beside them and writing down what they do and say. So I never know what's going to happen. And if I'm not surprised, then the reader can't be surprised.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Matthew?
My biggest hump has been technology changes, having to learn and adapt to the ever-changing technology as it affects my line of work. It's not a bad thing. Technology changes for our line of work is a positive thing. I have seen a lot of good come out of the ever-changing technological world that we're faced with. I actually recently, myself and another detective in the past couple of years, due to the advancements in technology, were able to solve a cold case that, up until recent advances in technology, it would have not been able to be solved.
Yeah, just like,
Yes.
just like that cold case that was just recently solved for the teacher in Beaumont. They
Mhm.
used the genealogy and the DNA, so it's really coming a long way with that too.
It's real fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for your question,
Thank you, Brandon.
Randy. I think we've got time for one more, and I think Miss Sally had a question for us. Sally, if you wanted to unmute yourself so you could ask.
Yes, hi, thank you. So I feel fairly confident in speaking for kind of, the true crime community and saying that most of us have that one case that initially got us interested or hooked, if you will. So to the panel at large, is there a case that has always stuck with you, whether a cold case or a solved case, either because it was really interesting or just unexpected, just that one case that you always kind of go back to in your mind?
Well,
I can answer this quickly for me. I think probably because I'm still working these cases on a day-to-day basis, I personally have not had any one that has stuck in my mind, but I'm constantly getting new case after new case. I just, I don't know if it's, I don't have time to actually process that, but maybe when I get retired, there will be one or two that sticks in my mind for me that I've worked.
Mm-hmm.
what about you, Robert?
Well, the one that sticks in my mind is the one that I worked on
Mhm.
30 plus years ago. That I know where the man who committed all the rapes spent a number of years in prison and got out before the full term of his sentences were adjudicated. He was supposed to have registered as a sex offender for life. He didn't. He ended up leaving the country, went to France, and at one point I did know where he was in France, but the French authorities would not extradite him, and so I would like to know, where he is, and I would like to see him have to pay for his continued felonious activity, which is the fact that he never registered as a sex offender as he was supposed to. And of course, we don't know what other things he's done after prison.
And what about you, Skip?
I'm sorry, I have such a short attention span. The question is,
If there was, if
One case that has really stuck with you over the years for whatever reason.
well, there's this podcast that I did that came out last year called Tom Brown's Body, about a boy who disappeared from the panhandle town of Canadian. And it's my first podcast, and I did it as a narrative audio documentary where I went and interviewed people and tried to, build suspense. And I just assumed by the time I finished this podcast that the answer would be clear. And it's a bigger mystery than ever as to what happened to this teenage boy who was president of his senior class, sort of an all-American boy. And then his Durango was found in one part of town, and then his body was found outside of the town a few years later. And it's sort of a genre in true crime, is the missing small town teenager. And that's the one that sticks with me.
Yeah. I'm actually from the Panhandle. I haven't listened to the podcast yet, but I'm looking forward to it. So thank you all for answering that question.
All right. We've only got like 2 minutes left. So I want to leave it up to the panel. If you've got any closing statements, anything you want to tell the audience before we wave goodbye and we draw our afternoon to a close, unfortunately.
What kind of wine do you serve at your Texas Wine and True Crime podcast, Anthea?
Oh, thanks for asking. So what we do is we kind of highlight Texas viticulture. So it's kind of a hidden gem. We're actually the 5th largest state in the US with wine production. And I work with different wineries and vineyards. I do some live shows, and then I drink the wine. I pair the wine with food, and then we tell the true crime story. So I talk about all different kinds of wines from all over Texas.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
That's great.
Check us out. Yeah. Thank you for asking.
This probably goes to Sally's question a moment ago too. I'm friends with retired detective, Los Angeles Police Department Detective 3, Steve Hodel out of Los Angeles, who's been working on solving the mystery of the Black Dahlia for many, many years. And to my way of thinking, and what I've read and I've talked with him and worked with him, he solved it as far as I'm concerned. And there's much more getting ready to come out about it. So people who are interested in true crime and that particular issue, stay tuned. And thank you for the opportunity to talk to everyone today. Thank you.
And Matthew?
I just would like to thank everybody for the opportunity to listening to us speak today. Thank you, Robert and Skip, for being here. And I'd urge everybody in your free time and you want to research some of this, go to your Dallas Public Library and spend some time researching some of this in their archives.
That is so kind of you to say, Matthew. So thank you all for joining us. One of our moderators, Alicia, has put a form in the chat. Just a short little survey. We would love it if you filled it out for us and told us what you thought. It would mean the world to us. Thank you so much for coming and being a part of this panel and discussion and being a part of Summer Saturdays. This was a great afternoon. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Skip. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you all for being here. This has been absolutely wonderful. And just in closing, thank you.
Can I plug my website?
Yes, please. If you have something to plug, please plug it now.
RobertJSadler.com, my website. You can find my books there and welcome you to come and take a look. Thank you.
Skip, do you have anything you wish to plug?
No, I just love the passion of true crime people. Saturday afternoon, 2 to 3:30, a million things to do, and we sit here and stare at our laptops.
Okay. And Matthew, do you have anything to plug, a Twitter or a?
No, I do not. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you very much, Jacob.
Thank you guys for being here. It means a lot to us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.